And the Police Service Commission has suspended Deputy Commissioner of Police Abba Kyari after U.S. court documents link him to a self-confessed international fraudster, Ramon Abbas, better known as Hush Puppy. Inspector General of Police in Nigeria, Usman Alkali, has recommended the suspension of Officer Kyari to allow for an independent investigation of the allegations against him. Hush Puppy alleged that he bribed Kyari to arrest one Vincent Chibuzo, a co-fraudster. And according to Instagram celebrity, he gave Kyari money to apprehend and jail one of his rivals in Nigeria after a dispute over a $1.1 million scam on Kyari business people. But Kyari denied any wrongdoing, saying he never collected money from Hush Puppy. Meanwhile, the self-confessed international fraudster Ramon Abbas, otherwise known as the Hush Puppy, as you've heard, will be sentenced in October this year. And that's according to U.S. Attorney's Office in the Central District of California. The U.S. court has also confirmed that a directive was issued to the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation for the arrest of Nigerian top detective Abba Kyari. The court's director of media relations says the U.S. magistrate judge has issued arrest warrants for the defendants in the case, including Kyari. Although Kyari dismisses the allegations, an investigation by the FBI claims the detective actually collaborated with Hush Puppy to facilitate the arrest of Vincent Chibuzo. So over the weekend, Dr. Bati and Rufai, of course, this news filtered in that the IGP had recommended a suspension, and that quickly followed. But there's more stories, development around this story. Let's just quickly take this. Also, Nigeria former Assistant Inspector General of Police, Chief Tunji Alakmini, shares his perspective about the Hush Puppy Abba Kyari issue. Let's take a listen.
I'm happy the Inspector General has written to the Police Service Commission for his suspension. That's long overdue. And I'm sure probably they were taking their time to look through the allegation being presented to them by the FBI. Because from what we gather about all these incidents, these are things we all read in the media. It is not something that I have the papers with me. It is not what you have the papers with you. It is all what we are reading in the media that we are basing all our judgment, all our submission, all our discussions on. But be that as it may, since the Inspector General of Police has deemed it fit to recommend him for suspension, I think it's a good, though late, but it's a good thing. And at least it will go a long way to show to the FBI, the community, and to the public. You know, we have a public that is always ready to put anybody on trial once it is in the public purview. And so the man is in public trial, is on an international view, and the FBI, the Americans, they are looking, they want to see what we are doing. So it's good it's been put on suspension so that it will give them a clear way for them to look into this matter.
Oh, there you have it. Perspectives coming in. It's a developing story. But some would say the Inspector General, the Police Service Commission in Nigeria have acted in wisdom. And this was the ethical route to take.
It's appalling that we're even saying they're acting in wisdom for doing what is supposed to be the ethical road to take. It's because of the bastardization of society. That's why we should all be tenterhooks waiting, fingers crossed, that if they're going to suspend him. That's the law everywhere. That's the norm everywhere. In fact, even before the suspension comes, he should be able to say, let me leave while this investigation goes on. So the right thing to do is to take the honorable part. It's because we have a standard where nothing works. Nobody resigns. Nobody ever takes the honorable part in this country. And that's why people want to sit tight. It's just because of that lack of honor, too, that government officials want immunity in office. I mean, if you are clean, why do you need immunity? Why do you need to be immune from court actions and things like that if you are clean? So, commendations. Because it's Nigeria, so we still like to commend them for doing what they ought to do. But really, aren't we supposed to get to a point where we don't commend people for doing what they ought to do in this country? What is the norm? I mean, when a man is being investigated, he can't still sit in his position while the investigation goes on. He should step aside for a bit. Secondly, the Police Service Commission has picked it up. I would like to ask, all of a sudden, we see a police service commission working. Where was the police service commission during NSAS? Where were they? Because police service commission is supposed to do a lot at regulating, the complexities and behavioral misdemeanors of police officers. So when people were complaining that SARS officials were hurting people, what was the police service commission doing then? It's good for them to come out. So let's see how this investigation goes on. Please, no hand should be in this. If the man is innocent, let your investigation show. If he's guilty, let the law take its course. But there should be no level of high-handedness. Because you see, in sanitizing our country, we need integrity across every part. And that's the only thing that can build the country. So the investigation, let's go through it. He might come out to say he's innocent of all of the charges, that the FBI is lying. He might come out to say that the FBI is true. We all wait for that. And here at the media, we'll be objective as possible. No media trial. But definitely, we will watch this space. And this should be a deterrent. And really, is it only Abba Kyari? What about other police officers that have not been mentioned in this?
Dr. Bati.
Okay, here we're dealing with, an alleged crime that is of an international dimension. We're also dealing with an alleged crime that has institutional implications. And we're also dealing with two sovereign states, the jurisdiction of the United States and the jurisdiction of Nigeria. I think that it is appropriate to say that in this particular case, the Inspector General of Police of Nigeria and the Police Service Commission have taken the right steps. They're following, the rules. We made this point last week, I think on Friday, that Nigeria also has a responsibility to investigate the matter and to look at it in terms of, if there is an allegation, not just of conspiracy, but also there is the allegation of abuse of office. A man who is leading the police intelligence response team and who is also a deputy commissioner of police, he cannot be accused of abusing his office, even from an international source, and then you just allow it to pass. So the Inspector General of Police has done well, first by setting up a committee, and also by reporting the matter to the Police Service Commission, which is responsible for promotions and discipline in the Nigerian police. And I think that the Police Service Commission, in the statement signed by Justice Clara Ogunbiyi, on behalf of the chairman of that commission, retired Inspector General of Police Musliu Smith, they've taken the right step to say that, look, DCP, Abba Kyari should step aside pending the investigations. Now, what it means is that, one, the police is trying to protect its own integrity as a responsible organization, and that's in order. Second, Nigeria is also trying to send a message across that it's a sovereign state. It has its own roots. It has its own municipal processes. And on the basis of those allegations, it will do its own investigations. I think that will sync very well with international expectations. Now, at the end of the day, we should also note that the Deputy Commissioner of Police, Abba Kyari, continues to insist that he's innocent. I understand he has deleted the statement about he being a super tailor, and that Abba Kyari Kutu does not exist. That had been deleted on Facebook because it was strongly criticized on that score. But I hope that he will cooperate with the investigating panel and make available to that investigating panel whatever information they require from him. Because this is not just about him anymore. This is not just about hush puppy. It is about the image of Nigeria. It is also about the integrity of the police institution. The other point to be made has to do with the politicization, what is emerging to be a politicization of the allegations. I don't think that is necessary, because all of a sudden, on the question of hush puppy and Abba Kyari, PDP, the main opposition party, and the All Progressives Congress, they begin exchanging altercations. Now, we should focus on the issues. The issues are strictly legal, professional. They deal with code of conduct and international obligations. So all this, if APC does not deal with Abba Kyari, it means APC is covering up corruption. Those are not the issues. And then over the weekend, they brought in another dimension, the Saraki story. Look, these are separate issues. Saraki is not at the level of hush puppy. So both major parties, should just be careful about, how they handle this going forward. But what is more important, of course, is that Nigeria is projecting itself in terms of the steps that have been taken so far, that it will not cover up anybody. And the investigation, as I pointed out on Friday, should go beyond Abba Kyari himself, because Abba Kyari talked about, there was reference in the FBI document to a team. Now, who are those other members of the team, and how deep is the rot within the Nigerian police? You can imagine what the public opinion will be in that regard. Many Nigerians have already crucified every policeman on the basis of this case. And that is why there must be transparency in terms of how the allegations are processed.
Indeed, well said.
And of course, the U.S. cannot just come and pick him. They will have to make extradition requests through the Office of the Attorney General. And I hope that the Attorney General of the Federation will offer the appropriate advice when he's called upon to do so.
Indeed. Nigeria remains a sovereign state. Thank you so much, Dr. Abati and Rufai. And that's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rochus Odiri, Michael Wilson, Aaron Akrejola, and myself to give updates on Africa global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. Rotus, how are you? Good morning. Over to you, my friend.
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Adesoa. Good morning to all our viewers. African business updates. We begin oil and gas. Shell is moving forward with its major divestments from Nigeria in terms of onshore and shallow water assets. Apparently, Shell has acquired the services of Standard Chartered Bank to assist it in the sale of Shell Development Petroleum Company of Nigeria, the SPDC. And it is with respect to a build-up of instances for the company over the last months or so. Mr. Ben Van Buren, who is the Managing Director, CEO of Shell, in a May AGM, annual general meeting, said that Shell's Niger Delta operations do not constitute much to its core operational strategy going forward. So, we've talked about activist shareholders pushing oil and gas companies, major oil and gas, international oil and gas companies, to reduce their fossil fuel operations. So this is kind of, in line with that. There was also, back in February of this year, the Dutch courts that ruled in favor of those Niger Delta farmers that had been, going back and forth in the courts with Shell over oil spills. That decision prompted Mr. Van Buren to call its Niger Delta activities a headache. There's also, of course, if you think about, operations in shallow water, the Gulf of Guinea, the piracy that's been going on, vandalism. I mean, these have all been building. So they are essentially looking to divest. Now, the value of its assets, if you consider the fact that, the SPDC is part of a joint venture with NNPC, with Total, with ENI, for onshore operations, they're going to be looking to possibly sell equity stakes in the company to different buyers. Not sure if one particular buyer can take over that entire asset. Also, another reason, the OMLs, the oil mining licenses, they come with operational costs that Shell is no longer willing to fund. Now, deep water, should actually state this clearly, their deep water operations are still going to continue without any hindrance. So Shell still has a presence here. But, I mean, when you think about, what the impact would be on corporate income tax, for instance, to Nigeria, there's going to be an impact there. Their technical expertise and so on and so forth that they bring to onshore and shallow water operations, there's an impact there. But it should be, for indigenous players in the oil and gas sector to be able to acquire those assets. Remember, I think it was February as well, OML 17, they sold that to oil and gas operations for Heirs Holdings. So there's that transfer taking place as well as from Shell to indigenous players. So we'll see how it goes. But still, it's major news which was broken by This Day newspaper over the weekend with respect to Shell's major divestment again from onshore and shallow water operations in Nigeria. More on oil and gas. We move now to the NNPC and the refineries. Same old story. About 104 billion naira has been lost. That's to the refineries over the last 13 months. This is coming from the NNPC's consolidated refinery financial performance from February 2020 through to February 2021. I mean, look, it's not a new story, but at least we need to be updated on what these losses are. So this is the latest, with respect to the operations from the NNPC. Turnaround maintenance has been, reducing output on these refineries. We know about the $1.5 billion price tag for Port Harcourt alone, which is going to take anywhere from 24 to 48 months. And NPC has said that we should see some crude derivatives from that in September of 2022, possibly. But the main thing here is that, again, the losses continue to rack up. Expenses throughout the period exceeded revenues for the refineries. And in fact, as far as yield efficiency is concerned, which is, the ability to be able to produce anything, yield efficiency was a big fat zero for all the refineries throughout this period. I mean, February 2020, 9.3 billion loss. March 2020, 10.3 billion loss. April 2020, just kept racking up monthly losses for each of these refineries. And that's just going to continue the narrative. I've got to get rid of them, but who's going to buy them, right? So that's with that on the NNPC. Again, 104 billion naira loss over the last 13 months. Manufacturing. The Manufacturing Association of Nigeria has put out a letter with respect to a comment on the central bank ending FX sales to the BDCs, the Bureau de Change. I believe there was a headline in the Sun newspaper or one of the other dailies that they objected to. I believe the headline suggested that they were against, that is, the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria was against the CBN ending FX sales to BDC. So they put out this letter saying, hey, listen, that's not the case. We support what the central bank is doing. It was signed by Mr. Segun Ajayi Kadir, who actually should be, he's been on the Global Business Report. We actually should have him later on this morning to talk further about, FX challenges for the manufacturing sector, because the letter does state that FX challenges as far as supply, still a big issue for manufacturing companies in Nigeria. But by and large, the letter stated, look, BDCs, the premium on what they sell to end users has been pretty high. They did mention the round tripping in there, so they support the CBN. But as everybody else has mentioned, the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria hopes that the banks, the commercial banks, will be able to meet up with supply. Again, from the central bank's perspective, it's easier to monitor the activities of the commercial banks under its purview than 5,000 plus BDCs. So hopefully we look to have a conversation with Mr. Segun Ajayi Kadir, Director General of the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, to talk further on their issues. But there is still an FX issue with respect to supply for manufacturing companies in Nigeria. Finally, South Africa. Another fuel price increase. South Africa has a self-adjusting slate levy mechanism. And that adjusts as pump prices move. For effective August 4th, in fact, not only are fuel prices increasing in South Africa, they're introducing a new levy. So this self-adjusting slate levy mechanism adjusts as things change, in conditions change. So it's a new R6.58 levy that is going to be included in the new pump price increases in South Africa, effective August the 4th, which I believe is day after tomorrow. So far this year, according to the Automobile Association of South Africa, petrol has increased 23% year to date, diesel up 20% year to date. Again, for this past month, the rand kind of depreciated a little bit against the dollar. There was also rising crude oil prices. So again, South Africa is continuing its flexible stance on having to adjust pump price of fuel to ongoing macroeconomic circumstances. I mean, and they're just moving along on top of the fact that they had the riots, on top of the fact they've got lockdowns, on top of the fact they've had all these issues. Still moving forward with that, and that's our African business update. Okay,
Rotus, thank you so much for that. I mean, we know why South Africa is having that problem. The riots were there, and during the riots, nobody was ready to bet on the rand. Definitely a rand will take a beating against the dollar. And that's the offshoot you're seeing there in the South African economy. So there's a method always to that madness. But I want to talk about refineries in Nigeria. 104 billion, and we are still subsidizing losses. Is that what we're doing? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, how did we even run these refineries aground in the first place? We did it ourselves. We went on a mad spree. We ran the refineries aground. Port Harcourt, for instance, I think was set up in 65. In about 79, they wrapped up the scale. I think in 1965, it was about 35,000 barrels per day. and they wrapped it up to about 60,000 barrels per day, and they built another one, I think about 89, to make it about 210,000 barrels per day. But what did we do? When the heaters and the dryer system in the refinery got spoiled, we didn't do turnaround maintenance. I think the last time we did turnaround maintenance for those refineries was in 1994. So they can't run effectively. But what have we done over the years? We keep on subsidizing inefficiency. So I ask, who pays for all of that waste that is going on? Now they're saying that they're doing turnaround and they're still investing in other refineries. What is this method, really? I don't get it. Is it safe? How about all the money we keep plowing into inefficiencies all these years? We could have, if we had maintained those refineries properly in the first place, we wouldn't get to the point where we are spending billions to be able to resuscitate the refineries in the first place. As a year 2000, Port Harcourt was still doing about 60,000 BPD. But what happened? Everything is just a slippery slope. You know, we just know how to take our own infrastructure in this country and damage it. Then we allow this same government, our government, to pay for our ineptitude and inefficiencies. We don't run a country this way. When will corruption leave this country alone?
Last week, it was reported that Nigeria spent over 12.07 trillion importing petrol. Yet, we have refineries that are there. You are reporting this morning that these refineries have lost over 104 billion naira. In terms of productivity, the report says 0.00%. What this latest report has not told us is how much has been spent on those refineries, despite the zero profit, despite the lack of productivity that we have in those refineries. The excuse that has been given by the NNPC in the report that you brought forward is that those refineries, particularly Port Harcourt and Kaduna, are undergoing rehabilitation. Now, that rehabilitation with regard to Port Harcourt refinery, we've been told the first phase of it will be ready by 2022. But I think the big problem, the big elephant in the room is that, look, for as long as, the NNPC continues to exercise control over those refineries, for as long as government is involved, it will be the same old story all over again. And in any case, there's no guarantee that under this administration, the rehabilitation of those refineries will be completed, which is why I think, the private sector involvement model represented by the Dangote refineries may well be the way forward. And already government has been talking about other private sector players who will be, allowed into that market. So if you have the Dangote refinery, you have other refineries, and you have just the NNPC being, a partner at a very moderate level, maybe that would be the way to go forward. The refineries in Nigeria have proven the point that government cannot manage business. When government is involved in business, what we see at the end of the day is inefficiency. As for the BDCs, yes, that document, the two-page document from the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria was making the rounds over the weekend. But I also like to recommend an article this morning in This Day by a gentleman called Boniface Chizia. He's an economist. Fallouts from the suspension of Bureau de Change. It's on page 14 of This Day Today, or the opinion page. And he raised two questions that I find very interesting. He asked, for example, that, okay, CBN has taken this step because obviously the BDCs have become, centers for arbitrage. They were originally 74. As at the time CBN took the decision, they were already over 5,000. And the CBN had pumped so much money. And that those BDCs are owned by very influential people in Nigeria who control the economy. And he asked the question, will the central bank be able to sustain this new initiative? Or will it crumble? Will it, relax under pressure and reverse itself? The second point that Boniface Chizia raises is the question about transparency. Oh, yes, people who are not properly served by the banks can pick up their phone toll-free and complain to the CBN. What is the mechanism in place to make sure, that the banks are not even worse than the BDCs? Meanwhile, the BDCs have been boasting that nobody is going to take them out of the market. They will source their forex from other sources. And then the bigger challenge is a story during the weekend that investors are withdrawing from that market in Nigeria, with grave implications for the kind of confidence that has been expressed by the chairman of the group of banks CEOs and by other players in that sector. So this is something that we need to watch very closely, and I hope that the CBN will have the confidence to stand on its feet and to resist the kind of pressure that Boniface Chizia was referring to today in this day, page 14.
Right. Thank you so much for your views, Rotus, and Dr. Abati and Rotus for the stories. Moving on to more business updates with John Michael Wilson now. He joins us from France. Michael? Great to have you.
Yeah, good morning.
Yeah. Morning.
Good morning. Yes, it's week really of looking ahead to the US jobless figures on Friday. That'll be the biggest event, and I think during the week we'll also be looking at how the global economy is actually recovering or not, as the case may be, from the pandemic. The usual kind of things is growth growing or is it plateauing? That seems to be the main question. Anyway, to the Asia Pacific markets, and the Nikkei is up almost 2% this morning. Mainland China's stocks are up about 0.75%. Hang Seng up about 1%. Again, various kinds of things going. XPeng saw its Hong Kong listed shares up 10% after record figures for electric vehicles. And staying on electric vehicles, I'm bringing you news of two companies here just to show how they're jockeying position. But just before we do that, China factory activity fell to a 15-month low. PMI reflecting basically raw material costs rising quite hugely. Caixin manufacturing survey at 50.3 was expected at 51.3. The point is that when it's over 50%, it gives a bit of optimism about what's going on. So it's basically resting evenly placed. Basically, these higher costs are affecting profit growth. So onto those electric vehicle manufacturers, Li Auto just beating XPeng. I only draw attention to these things because it shows how the general market for electric vehicles is actually growing in China. And Li Autos, which is actually listed in the United States, as a result of getting into a leading position, its shares up 15.8% in Asian trading. Okay, to Australia, and the co-founder of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, it's his company called Square, is agreeing to buy a company called Afterpay. This is an Australian buy now, pay later site, which is quite fashionable. It'll be the biggest buyout in Australian history. Afterpay has already got 16 million customers, 100 million people worldwide use it, and it will help the company expand into the US. HSBC, worth looking at half-year results from them. Profit more than doubled. Basically, what that's saying is that they're relatively optimistic about the future of the global economy. As you know, it tends to be focused as far as it tends to be focused in Asia, but shares are up 1% in Hong Kong, and I think that people are looking at a relatively optimistic view of what's happening as far as the economies around the world are concerned. US markets, as you know, slipped back on Friday, but ended the month, the sixth month of increases in their indexes. Inflation fell. It was supposed to be 3.6%. It's the preferred measure of personal expenditure in the United States. It fell to 3.5%. But as I said right at the beginning of this, all eyes really on the jobs figures on Friday. About that more later. As far as the UK is concerned, here's a good one for you. Hollywood is planning a £700 million investment into television and film studios in the UK, just outside London, in a place called Boreham Wood, which is in Hertfordshire, for those of you who know the area. It's expected that it does things like La La Land and Prince of Bel-Air at the moment, the company concerned. It'll be bigger than Pinewood, actually. Pinewood is well known for producing James Bond things. 4,500 jobs, 2.84 billion spent in film and TV production in the UK. They think we're rather good at it, really, to the rest of the world, and that's why that big company is coming. Hollywood's coming to Boreham Wood. So, as far as the week ahead's concerned, then the big ones on Friday: UK non-farm payrolls. A bit of a disappointing figure in June: 850,000 jobs added. What will July actually reveal? We don't know yet, of course. But unemployment rate was 5.9% in June. Will we see a slight improvement in that? The disappointing thing about the United States, there are apparently 9 million job vacancies unfilled, people not dashing back to work there, and flash PMIs we're going to get from the UK and the US, which will give another further forecast as far as business is concerned. So coming up also Bank of England after the retirement of Andy Haldane from the Interest Rate Committee. There's been not a great deal of diversity as far as opinion on interest rates and growth is concerned, and particularly inflation. But we'll be looking to see what they say on Thursday about those very things, see if there's consent, and also whether there's going to be a folding back of quantitative easing. And BP, now half yearly figures from them, again, an oil company right in the middle of transformation from where it's been standing at the moment into green energy, and we'll see how it actually happens there. Its oil price figure is quite interesting. Dividends dependent upon $45 a barrel. Now we're up to $75 a barrel. That should help it very, very slightly. And finally, so oil falling about 1% in Asian trade, basically because of those bad, well, not huge China industrial production figures, and also gold going back up to $1,800 again. It's sort of going around that kind of figure. Technically, it might get slightly more, but basically it's about any decent inflation news or not as the week goes on. That's your global view.
Well, Michael, very quickly, two things. The first has to do with the Bank of England. The Bank of England is meeting on Thursday, the Monetary Policy Committee, but the members seem divided on the issues of what to do with inflation rate, whether inflation rate will be transitory or not, and what to do about quantitative easing and the debt of over 895 billion pounds that is already in place. The House of Lords was complaining the other day. So what should we be expecting from the Monetary Policy Committee? Looks like they will keep interest rate at 0.1%, but what is likely to happen with inflation rate and quantitative easing? And secondly, what is called housing fever in the OECD countries. It looks like the housing sector has done very well as the global economy continues to recover. But is this a sustainable boom, or this also will in a way just merely be transitory? And what should we watch out for?
I don't know about the property market globally. As far as the UK is concerned, there's always that kind of thing. Low interest rates, more people changing jobs, also maybe slight more mobility after COVID as well. So that tends to push house prices up. But basically, interest rates low will keep that going. And the fact about a very densely populated place like the UK is concerned, it means that house prices just tend to rise. I can only speak about the UK. I'll talk about the US as well, just briefly. What we've noticed there is that building construction costs have been rising dramatically over the year, particularly lumber or timber, as we would call it, going up as well. So I think that might halt housing construction in the United States, or at least halt the rise very, very slightly. But they are very, very mobile. Whether they will actually be taking up these 9 million jobs which are available, I don't really know. As far as the Bank of England is concerned, I did say that what's happened there since Andy Haldane is gone, there's less disagreement about interest rates and inflation, apparently. Maybe we'll see more on this. That's what we're looking for. You're quite right. Will there be any indications about whether they think inflation is transitory and whether there'll be any rounding back of quantitative easing? Again, that's something which this new committee will have to consider. As I said, I think there's slightly less divergence in opinion right now, but we'll see. As far as interest rates are concerned, quite right, no change, obviously.
All right, two things, Michael, real quickly. Number one, I think PIMCO was coming out to say that the inflationary tendencies of the housing market is just adding to that bulk of inflation palaver we're all having. Now, the former basket was food items and the likes and some other things, and now you're having property prices going up, and it's adding to that inflationary pressure across the board. So is this the time to go the way of people that say, okay, yeah, this is the time to know that inflation is here to stay? Because also the Russian central bank governor has come out to say that inflation is a big deal and might be with us for quite a while. So if the Russians are complaining about it, the Eurozone is complaining about it, everybody's complaining about it. That's one. Number two will be about this, musical chairs game between America and China corporations. What's the way forward?
The way forward is, as I've always said, is for some leverage to be applied to China. What does it actually want to do? How does it place itself? Where is it in this corporate and capitalist world that it wants to join? Will it do that? Are we going to see more and more regulatory pressure on high-tech companies in China? And what will the tariff situation with the United States be? I don't think there'll be a great deal of move in the United States because we're getting closer, whether we like it or not, to the end of Joe Biden, basically. 2024, it looks a long way ahead. It isn't really. He's got a pretty big bill to get through, which is infrastructure in the United States. I think that their overseas operations may be quite small. As far as inflation's concerned, as I say, I think there's a long way to go before we proper judgments about it. Yes, sure, the Russian bank's worried about it. It may well be. I mean, the Russian central bank's worried about it because they've got to import lots of quite expensive metals, oil, and the rest of it. Which is seeing their inflation go up. I don't particularly count what the Russian central bank says about that. I'm much more interested in where we're going with the United States and certainly the Bank of England, because those are the two major currencies. Whatever you say about it, Russia's big, but it's not really a world player as far as moving currencies and interest rates is concerned.
If we were to make a prediction, what do you think is likely to be the inflation outlook, particularly for Britain, above target? It's already 2.5. Are we likely to see an increase up to about 3.6%?
I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, I could be really wrong. I don't like predictions like that because they are extremely difficult to do right now. I don't know whether what we're seeing is a spike or whether it's long term. And it has to be said, nor does anybody else. We did talk last week about companies actually looking to hedge their positions. You would expect them to do that, certainly. That's where that 3.6 has come from. As far as central banks are concerned, they aren't doing that right now. Again, I think it's too early to be actually drawing firm conclusions about these kind of forecasts. I think they're deeply unhelpful, quite honestly. You've got two sides to things. You've got central banks saying one thing, and you've got corporates guarding their positions, just as you would expect them to do as a shareholder. That's the truth of the matter. So no predictions from me. I think that we may see a further spike, but long term, I suspect that the targets will remain until they don't.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. This one?
Well, for the update on COVID-19 pandemic, let's take a look at the latest statistics. According to the Johns Hopkins University tally, coronavirus has now killed over 4.2 million people and infected over 198 million others. Over 4.1 billion vaccine doses have been administered. The WHO is warning of the vast spread of the Delta variant of the coronavirus and says it should serve as a call to action to speed up vaccination around the world. It comes as governments face resistance to tougher measures to get the available jabs into arms, while others are considering booster jabs at the moment. Well, here in Nigeria, 17 states are responsible for the latest data, 407 new infections recorded in the last 24 hours. Again, of course, we're seeing the most numbers coming out from Lagos with 160. Nigeria has now recorded over 174,000 coronavirus cases. And this is coming as Africa battles a third wave of infections. But perhaps the good news here is that the United States government has sent nearly 10 million doses of vaccines to Nigeria and South Africa. Over 4 million doses of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccines will go to Nigeria, and 5.66 million doses of Pfizer vaccine will go to South Africa. There are reports suggesting that the vaccines transported on 2 planes already arrived in Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport yesterday and were received by officials of the United Nations Children Agency, UNICEF, on behalf of Nigeria. Well, all efforts to get clarification from the authorities prove abortive, but we do expect details from the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 when it briefs the press later today during its weekly presser. Now, the donation by the U.S. is the single largest donation Nigeria will receive so far outside of the COVAX scheme. For South Africa, it's also the single largest sent by the United States to any country since it began sending vaccine shots overseas. Now, let's go back to that graph you saw earlier. Recall, only last week, the WHO said Africa was entering an encouraging phase as COVID-19 vaccine supply to the continent increased. Well, this is a quick look at statistics provided by the Tony Blair Institute Africa COVID vaccine tracker. I must add that there's been slight changes since this was released. For instance, Tanzania has received its first shipment. This is showing the consumption of vaccines, the deployment of vaccines on the continent. Expected doses have been delivered. Contrary to insinuations that African countries are solely relying on donations, this tracker has shown that some African countries are actually purchasing their vaccine doses. It also shows that AstraZeneca is the most used vaccine on the continent, and it's no surprise there because AstraZeneca is the most used vaccine globally at the moment. Still talking vaccines, pharmaceutical companies Pfizer and Moderna have raised the prices of their COVID-19 vaccines in their latest European Union supply contract. Well, according to a report by Financial Times newspaper, Pfizer vaccine has risen by about $5 to $23.15 per shot. Moderna, on the other hand, has risen by $2.90 to $25.50 a dose. The deal runs up to 2023 and covers up to 2.1 billion vaccine doses. Of course, it comes at a time when countries are mulling the possibility of administering a third dose for efficacy. And finally, to the U.S., where the U.S. President Joe Biden's chief medical advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says he does not expect the country will be returning to lockdowns despite the growing risk of COVID-19 infections posed by the highly transmissible Delta variant. Although he admits that things are going to get worse, he says a sufficient percentage of Americans have now been vaccinated to prevent such measures as lockdown.
In the U.S., over 60% of the population has been vaccinated, and that's probably what gives Dr. Anthony Fauci the confidence that the country will not necessarily return to a lockdown, because he says what we're witnessing is an outbreak of the unvaccinated. And in that regard, he probably was saying more or less that if you get vaccinated, then you don't run the risk of death. You may not even run the risk of hospitalization. You'll be able to cope much better. But there are parts of the United States already, as I pointed out previously, where restrictions are already being imposed. Take, for example, in Florida,
yes,
where the county mayors, are fighting the governor who, because of election next year, is probably refusing to have lockdowns or to have restrictions. But in parts of that particular state, there are restrictions. Also in Texas, also in Missouri. But the basic point being made by Anthony Fauci, and I hope in this regard he's not contradicting the President of the United States, who last week rolled out a new set of guidelines for federal workers, for federal contractors, for other categories of citizens, and even with the indication that federal workers may have to undergo testing on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, to be sure that they are fully vaccinated and that they are safe. And it's not only just in the US that there's this concern about this third wave, about the Delta variant, which is the problem. In Australia, in Sydney, the authorities have had to call out the army to enforce compliance with the restrictions that have been put in place in Sydney and other parts of Australia. In the United Kingdom, or rather Britain, is beginning to look at the possibility of a booster vaccination, with effect, we're told, from September 6th. And the whole idea is this whole argument that we had on this program maybe 2 weeks ago about mix and match that has been introduced in parts of Southeastern Asia, in Indonesia specifically, in Thailand specifically. And now you find the US also considering the same possibility, and you find the UK now saying, that people will take booster, shots. These booster shots will be given to persons who are above 50 or people who are compromised or immunosuppressed, as they put it. Now, in the case of Africa, yes, you've pointed out that some African countries are not depending on charity or donation. You can mention specifically South Africa, which has been quite forward-looking in terms of procurement of vaccines First, they failed. They didn't consider AstraZeneca good enough. They moved to Johnson & Johnson, the first country to do so. And, South Africa has been able to make some progress. Egypt, Morocco, these are countries that are involved in partnerships, with some Chinese companies to be able to transfer intellectual property and have cooperation. But where I'm concerned is Nigeria. Nigeria will seem, to date, to be depending on charity, on donation. There was a story over the weekend, yesterday, that the United States has now donated to Nigeria over 4 million doses of the Moderna vaccine, right?
Yes.
Now, a week earlier, it was China that we were told that gave Nigeria 470,000 doses of yet undisclosed vaccines. Now, where is the program of Nigeria getting involved in this game, either in terms of research or in terms of, purchase? And now, if we're going to sign contracts now, the price for Moderna and Pfizer vaccines have gone up internationally. So I don't see enough forward, progressive thinking in terms of how we are managing this process. But if indeed the US has given us over 4 million doses, 4.8 million doses. The other week, the US gave Tanzania 1.08 million doses of vaccines. That will be consistent with the resolve at the G7 summit in Cornwall. It will also be consistent with the commitment of President Joe Biden to ensure that there is support for developing parts of the world. The UK is also promising 9 million doses before the end of this year. But what are we doing in terms of looking out for ourselves?
I think the problem in Nigeria is that we forget in a hurry that our road is still long to herd immunity. We forget that we are over 200 million. We think we are like some other African countries like Kenya, that is 50 million population, 60 million population thereabouts. Ghana, less than 30 million population. We forget that we are 200 million. And the road is still very long. We think we are the same category like Egypt. For us, 4 million doses will not cut it. 5 million doses will not cut it. It is for countries like Kenya that 400,000 doses like the UK sent to Kenya over the weekend will cut it for us. But our road is still long. And that's why we need to do the research. As long as we have identified vaccine candidates, we need to develop them. And it needs to come out quickly. Because that's the only way we can get to herd immunity. We forget that there's a level to charity. A man that is eating, he can't give you more than what he has eaten. And that's the case we are today. There's a level to even buying. Buying works on supply and demand. It means what is available, you buy.
Yes.
What if they don't have what you are looking for? You will take your money and put in your pocket. And I thought we have put some money aside, or we said the supplementary budget was to purchase COVID-19 vaccine. I think they have approved the supplementary budget. So what's the problem now? Why can't we get the money to even buy? But buying will not cut in the long run. What will cut it in the long run is for Nigeria to take those 3 vaccine candidates, pass them through first stage, second stage. Before middle of next year, we should be ready with those vaccine candidates and roll out production en masse and use that to create jobs for people. Use vaccine to create jobs. You see, it's because we're in a country where we don't learn from mistakes. This COVID is supposed to be a blessing in disguise to create millions of jobs for people in the pharmaceutical sector, if we are thinking.
But the point needs to be made that up to about 70% of African countries will not even be able to achieve up to 10% immunization between now and September. Even if we sign the contracts now, we're already late because these contracts take time. And there is no guarantee that some of these other companies will be willing to engage in technology transfer or intellectual property transfers, which was a big issue for the European Union when that idea was proposed by India and South Africa. So as in everything, Nigeria will seem to have dropped the ball. And the average Nigerian will say, well, we are looking unto God.
We can't keep looking unto
us.
God. Because we can sell the vaccine when we start producing. See, Botswana is looking for vaccine.
Okay.
Big time.
All right. Thank you for that, Rufai and Dr. Bati.